In Mariupol, hundreds of thousands of people have been sheltering under armament without water or power for more than a week. Ukraine's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Oleg Nikolenko claimed on Twitter, "Ceasefire violated." Russian forces are now shelling the humanitarian corridor from Zaporizhia to Mariupol. 30 buses had been sent for evacuations. Russia opened a separate corridor, allowing residents out of the eastern city of Sumy on Tuesday, the first successful evacuation under such a safe route. The Ukrainian city of Sumy was given a green corridor. The first stage of evacuation began, the Ukrainian State Communications Agency tweeted. Those buses are headed to other cities in Ukraine, but many people have chosen to flee the country instead. Safa Mseli, a spokesperson for the UN's International Organization for Migration, tweeted that 2 million have now fled the country, including at least 100,000 people who are not Ukrainian. 4 days in a row, Russia has offered a ceasefire to allow an evacuation, but civilians have been attacked as they fled. These people are trying to leave Irpin, near Kyiv. McGrath, with the invasion well into its second week, Russian troops were making significant advances in southern Ukraine, but stalled in some other regions. Soldiers and volunteers fortified the capital, Kyiv, with hundreds of checkpoints and barricades designed to thwart a takeover. A steady rain of shells and rockets fell on other population centers, including the Kyiv suburb of Butcha, where the mayor reported heavy artillery fire. "We can't even gather up the bodies because the shelling from heavy weapons doesn't stop day or night," Mayor Anatol Fedoruk said. "Dogs are pulling apart the bodies on the city streets. It's a nightmare." In one of the most desperate cities, the encircled southern port of Mariupol, an estimated 200,000 people, nearly half the population of 430,000, were hoping to flee. Russia's Coordination Center for Humanitarian Efforts in Ukraine and Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk both said a ceasefire was agreed to start on Tuesday morning to allow some civilians to evacuate. But it was not clear where all the corridors would lead to, amid disagreement between the two sides. Russia's Coordination Center suggested there would be more than one corridor, but that most would lead to Russia, either directly or through Belarus. At the UN, however, the Russian ambassador suggested corridors from several cities could be opened and people could choose for themselves which direction they would take. Vereshchuk, meanwhile, said only that the two sides had agreed to an evacuation of civilians from the eastern city of Sumy toward the Ukrainian city of Poltava. Those to be evacuated include foreign students from India and China, she said. She reiterated that proposals to evacuate civilians to Russia and its ally Belarus, which was a launch pad for the invasion, were unacceptable. Later, Ukrainian presidential aide Kyrylo Tymoshenko posted a video of yellow buses, with a red cross plastered on the side, that he said showed evacuations from Mariupol toward the city of Zaporizhia. He said that humanitarian aid was also being sent into Mariupol. Demands for effective passageways have surged amid intensifying shelling by Russian forces. The steady armaments, including in some of Ukraine's most populated regions, have yielded a humanitarian crisis of diminishing food, water, and medical supplies. Through it all, Zelensky said Ukrainian forces were showing unprecedented courage. "The problem is that for one soldier of Ukraine, we have 10 Russian soldiers, and for one Ukrainian tank, we have 50 Russian tanks," Zelensky told ABC News. But he noted that the gap in strength was diminishing and that even if Russian forces come into all our cities, they will be met with an insurgency. A top US official said several countries were discussing whether to provide the warplanes that Zelensky wants. Ukraine's military announced what it considered a significant tactical victory late on Monday. Ukrainian forces a Russian general near the besieged city of Kyiv, the second Russian senior commander to die in the invasion. Major General Vitaly Gerasimov, first deputy commander of Russia's 41st Army, was on Monday, the Chief Directorate of Intelligence of Ukraine's Defense Ministry said in a statement. Russian officials have not confirmed this, but the executive director of investigative journalism site Bellingcat, Christo Grosev, said he had confirmed it with a Russian source. and identified the Russian Mariupol was short on water, food and power, and mobile phone networks are down. Stores have been looted as residents search for essential goods. Police moved through the city, advising people to remain in shelters until they heard official messages broadcast over loudspeakers to evacuate. Hospitals in Mariupol are facing severe shortages of antibiotics and pains, and doctors performed some emergency procedures without them. Loading the lack of phone service left anxious citizens approaching strangers to ask if they knew relatives living in other parts of the city and whether they were safe. In Kyiv, soldiers and volunteers have built hundreds of checkpoints to protect the city of nearly 4 million, often using sandbags, stacked tires, and spiked cables. Some barricades look significant, with heavy concrete slabs and sandbags piled more than 2 stories high, while others appeared more haphazard, with hundreds of books used to weigh down stacks of tires. Every house, every street, every checkpoint, we will fight to the if necessary, said Mayor Vitaly Klitschko. In Kyiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, with 1.4 million people, heavy shelling slammed into apartment buildings. I think it struck the 4th floor under us, Dmitry Sedorenko said from his Kyiv hospital bed. Immediately, everything started burning and falling apart. When the floor collapsed beneath him, he crawled out through the 3rd story, past the bodies of some of his neighbors. Picking through the ruins of a cottage in Herenka, the rescue worker wondered what the motive could be. Come and see what they have done. Efrem Lukatsky, AP in the small town of Herenka, where shelling reduced one area to ashes and shards of glass, rescuers and residents picked through the ruins as chickens pecked around them. What are they doing? Rescue worker Vasil Oksak asked of the Russian attackers. There were 2 little kids and 2 elderly people living here. Come in and see what they have done. In the south, Russian forces also continued their offensive in Mykolaiv, opening fire on the Black Sea shipbuilding center of 500,000 people, according to Ukraine's military. Rescuers said they were putting out fires caused by rocket attacks in residential areas. Loading at The Hague, Netherlands, Ukraine pleaded with the International Court of Justice to order a halt to Russia's invasion, saying Moscow is committing widespread war crimes. Russia is resorting to tactics reminiscent of medieval siege warfare, encircling cities, cutting off escape routes and pounding the civilian population with heavy ordnance, said Jonathan Gimblett, a member of Ukraine's legal team. Russia snubbed the court proceedings, leaving its seats in the Great Hall of Justice empty.